Chapter 11 Focus on one thing. 3 weeks earlier Shinobu could relax once more. Only here, within the grounds of Demon Slayer headquarters, did she truly feel at peace. The forest surrounding the base became less and less dense, giving way to an area dedicated to their cause. Comprised of many acres, headquarters was a sight to behold. There were many buildings, each one serving a purpose of their own. Stunning architecture defined each habitation, for the Ubayashiki family spared no expenses in creating a place that was both well hidden and pleasing to the senses. Gardens extended as far as the eyes could see, and the sing-song voices of birds permeated the serene atmosphere. Many Kashigi crows flew about, squawking orders as they either left for an assignment, or returned from one. A number of demon slayers walked about as well, cluttering around the dirt path that traced around their base of operations. Every mission, every order, every policy, none of it would be possible without this place. It was an anchor, a symbol, a beacon, of their organization. How she missed it! Shinobu hadn't been gone for too long, but it felt as though she hadn't seen their home in many months. She led the way. Behind, her Tsugyuko walked silently, staring ahead as she held a butterfly on her finger. Murata and Ozaki were also present, keeping pace with Kaneo. Both of them were close. So close their shoulders were touching. Shinobu glanced their way. Once they caught her gaze, the pair stiffened, put a bit of distance between each other. She smirked. Teasing them was always fun. Romance between members of the Corps wasn't uncommon. It could be difficult, though, considering their line of work. At any point, either partner could die, leaving the other in a pit of despair, either unable to fight, or given a new resolve to become stronger. In any case, it was a gamble, but a gamble some were willing to take. Relationships weren't frowned upon, and the master was understanding about such matters. After all, with an intense job like this, unavoidable outlets for coping and stress relief were bound to occur. As long as it didn't interfere with work, such bonds were tolerated. So, if Ozaki and Murata wanted to be together, she had no reason to oppose. They moved deeper into Demon Slayer territory. The quartet was greeted by the sight of headquarters' most beautiful building. The Butterfly Mansion. Shinobu's personal abode. Even more stunning than Master Ubayashiki's home, it rose high above all other structures, framed by gorgeous walls that wrapped around every corner. This was where all injured slayers came to be treated, thus, it needed to be large enough to house a great number of people. Just wait until Naruto sees this. The thought came unbidden, without warning. Suddenly, her mind drifted to that blonde doctor. She smiled to herself, just imagining his reaction when he finally came to headquarters, when he finally saw her estate. He'd most likely be in awe, his adorable features surprised and excited. She could almost picture it, and anticipation swelled in her chest. Only a few days had passed since she left Tokyo, yet she couldn't wait for Naruto and Yuichiro to arrive. Of course, Susumaru would be there as well, but Shinobu still had to discuss things with Master Ubayashiki. She still had to give him a detailed explanation of what exactly happened. Pausing at the entrance of her home, Shinobu turned to her companions. "I'll be heading to see the master," she stated. "Murata, Ozaki. Please wait here, in case you are called upon to give a report." Nervous, yet eager, both slayers nodded. Shinobu looked at them fondly. In just several days, they had changed. They were stronger, more confident, and more experienced. After all, not many encountered the 12 Kazuki and lived to tell the tale. "Kaneo, show them inside, will you?" Her Tsugyuko nodded once, then ushered Ozaki and Murata through the front gate. Kaneo's final selection was approaching. Shinobu wondered if her Tsugyuko still needed a bit of training before the event. But she shook those thoughts from her mind. Kaneo was more than ready, more than capable. She was a demon slayer in all but name. When she finished final selection, she would get her own personalized Nichiren blade, and be able to take on missions on her own, without Shinobu's supervision. With that, Shinobu made her way down another road, passing by a few demon slayers on the way. Without fail, they would pause, then bow their heads in greeting as they crossed paths. She nodded each time, and they would scurry along excitedly. Finally, she arrived at the master's house. It was smaller than the butterfly mansion, but just as elegant. The white rocks shifted beneath her feet as she drew near. Her gaze strayed to the right. Two children, girls, were playing with a ball, tossing it back and forth with glee. Their silver hair glinted in the morning sun. Both were identical in appearance, possessing the same features, and dressed in similar blue kimonos. Hinaki and Nichika, the older twin daughters of the master. They paused their game to wave at her, and Shinobu gladly returned the gesture. Both of them were a bit odd, but very polite and well-behaved children. Just as she was about to enter the master's home, his front door slid open, revealing someone Shinobu hadn't seen in some time. Ah! The beautiful pink hair of her fellow Hashira fluttered in a sudden breeze. Her emerald eyes were warm and gentle. And her attire was as bold as ever, comprised of a shirt that displayed a substantial amount of cleavage. Few people made Shinobu genuinely smile. Mitsurai Kenroji was one of those people. The moment their gazes met, the love Hashira froze. Then she rushed forward with a grin so wide, Shinobu couldn't help but laugh softly. An instant later, she was engulfed in the embrace of the third physically strongest Hashira in the Corps. Shinobu was lifted off the ground, face smushed against Mitsurai's bosom. However, quickly realizing her actions, the love Hashira let go of Shinobu, blushing vibrantly. Sorry, Shinobu. Mitsurai stammered, rubbing at her silky pink hair. I just got super excited. I mean, I haven't seen you in a while, and you were just standing there, looking so cool like you always do. I couldn't help myself. Sorry. Within moments of seeing her, Shinobu was already smirking. It's okay, Mitsurai. I'm happy to see you too. Relief coursed through Mitsurai, and she continued rubbing at her hair in a sheepish manner. Shinobu found it endearing. Despite all the death they faced as demon slayers, knowing that at least one of them was able to remain cheerful always managed to lighten the mood, especially when the Hashira gathered. Kenroji's exuberance wasn't fake, either. Not like Shinobu's. Which made it all the more welcoming. You're returning from a mission. Shinobu continued. The beautiful woman nodded. Yup. Just got back. I think the master was really happy to see me. At that, she flushed deeply, almost squealing with delight. Of course he was, Mitsurai. Shinobu shook her head with a mirthful chuckle. As always, Kenroji was unaware of just how incredible she was. They discussed for a time, with Mitsurai recounting what she'd been through over several weeks. It was nice, just talking. Shinobu listened. Once more, she was amazed that such a gentle person was capable of slaughtering so many demons. They'd been on assignments together before, and this kind, gentle soul was far stronger than she was. Clasping her hands behind her back, Mitsurai leaned forward. What about you, Shinobu? The master mentioned an important report you sent. Did something happen on your mission? Yeah. Shinobu whispered. I encountered 3 members of the 12. 3 lower moons. All at once. Mitsurai stiffened, emerald eyes bulging. What? I know, she quickly added. It sounds absurd, even after the fact. But it did happen. And I met some incredible people in Tokyo. I don't even know what to say, Mitsurai said quietly. Gently, she placed both hands on Shinobu's shoulders. I've encountered my fair share of lower moons, and that was over the course of a few years. But 3 at once? Are you all right? Shinobu's smile was small, yet so beautiful. I am. The pink-haired Hashira sighed, reassured. She understood the toll these battles had on them. Sure, they were strong, they were the most powerful members of the Corps, but they were still human. Still prone to injury, to death. Even against lower moons, anything could happen. She knew this personally, recalling her and Rengoku's battle against a lower moon years ago. Okay. Mitsurai let go of Shinobu's shoulders. I just wanted to make sure, is all. Thank you for asking. Shinobu glanced at the master's home, hesitating. I can't tell you the details just yet. When we all gather for our meeting, everything that happened in Tokyo will be explained. Though curiosity burned in her eyes, Mitsurai nodded. They parted ways a moment later, agreeing to meet up again at night in the Butterfly Mansion. Taking a breath, Shinobu made her way inside the master's home. His room was only a few steps down the hall. She announced herself, then entered, gently opening the sliding doors. Master Yabayashiki's calming smile was the first thing she saw. He was sitting on a futon. His wife, Amina, was next him, holding the very report Shinobu had sent via Crow before leaving Naruto's clinic. A frown grew on Shinobu's face. In the 2 weeks she'd been gone, the master's condition had worsened. It wasn't noticeable to most, but as a practitioner of medicine, these subtle changes were plain as day. The lavender sores had grown, stretching from his face to parts of his neck. Shinobu, greeted Kaguya. His gentle voice washed over her. Shinobu got on one knee, bowing her head. Master. I've returned. I'm glad. Genuine delight glinted in his pale eyes. Please, come closer. Take a seat. A mat was in front of the futon, and Shinobu gladly obeyed. She removed her sword and placed it beside her. Master, she began quietly. How are you feeling? Shinobu, spoke the master, in a soothing voice. While I appreciate your concern, my health does not matter at the moment. It was a kind-hearted dismissal, a stern acceptance of his impending death. Shinobu's frown deepened. Let us recount what happened in Tokyo. She nodded reluctantly. Yes, master. Amina held up papers detailing the events. They had already reviewed it, but she read the entire report once more, carefully and slowly. Once she finished, the woman's hands trembled. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears. Yuichiro Tokaido, Amina whispered. To think, he was still alive. I thought he'd perished. I left him. I took his brother, and left him behind. How? How could I make such a careless mistake? Kaguya held his wife's hand. It's all right, Amina. We've talked about this. You didn't know. Though blind, he turned directly to Shinobu. Regardless, he was saved by this. Dr. Uzumaki. Shinobu nodded once. Yes, he's the man I encountered on my mission. I see. Kaguya was suddenly thoughtful. And he was capable of defeating 3 lower moons without formal training in a breathing style. Another nod. This is fascinating, said the master. I'm well aware of the existence of special humans, such as you Hashira, but a layman powerful enough to best the 12 Kizuki, this is unheard of. Where does he hail from? I don't know. Shinobu remembered one of their first conversations in Naruto's clinic. He told me he's not from Japan, that there are others like him in his country. A human with the powers of a demon. Kaguya hummed thoughtfully. Besides the demon living under his roof, he's shown no allegiance to Kibutsuji, correct? Without question, the insect Hashira answered firmly, an intensity in her gaze. Joining that man would never even cross Naruto's mind. Kaguya stroked his chin. Then, about his blood. Would it be safe to assume it's something similar to Sanami's? A type of Mareka, perhaps. From what I gathered, not quite. Shinobu straightened. It's far more potent, far more enticing, than Sanemize. Demons are drawn to him. He doesn't need to be bleeding, either. They can't seem to help themselves, he told me. So much so that they risk exposure in a busy street just for the chance to eat him. However, this demon. This Susumaru. She's different, Amine added, glancing at Shinobu's notes. Is she not affected by his blood? What is their relation to each other? I'm not completely sure of what happened between them, or how they met, Shinobu answered. I do know that she cares for him. She would never dream of devouring him, or any other humans for that matter. However, I still believe that his blood has an effect on her in some way. He does, after all, give her blood, as she still needs to remain sane as a demon. So, hypothetically speaking, if Naruto Uzumaki suddenly vanished, Amina began, would this demon revert back to her old ways? No, she wouldn't. She'd much rather go insane from hunger, or walk out in the sun, than disappoint him by devouring humans. Shinobu was surprised that she was vouching for Susumaru so strongly. They weren't necessarily on friendly terms. Yet, this demon had done something she never thought possible. She'd changed Shinobu's perspective on demonkind, if slightly. I also tried to recruit him to the core, but he resisted the offer. Her fists clenched in her lap. I want to try again, she admitted. Kaguya nodded slowly. He considered her words carefully. Based on what I'm hearing, it seems he would be an asset to our cause. His blind gaze focused on the insect Hashira. Don't worry, Shinobu. You'll get your chance to try and convince him once more. A spark of excitement jolted through her. Then that means. Yes. Kaguya smiled warmly. He's approved to come. Along with Yuichiro and Susumaru. Shinobu bowed her head. She fought down the smile etching across her face. Thank you, Master. You won't regret this. Because now, someone who could possibly cure the Master of his illness would be coming. The other Hashira might not approve of my decision, Kaguya continued. But I think it's necessary for them to know that not all demons are on Kibutsuji's side. And the arrival of Muichiro's brother is cause for a celebration. Agreed, Amina said, albeit sadly. She still seemed guilty about Yuichiro. Shinobu lifted her head. I'm glad that you have such trust in me, Master. I trust you with my life, Shinobu. I hope you know that. Kaguya's words touched her heart in such a way that she could not describe. I think this mission was good for you, he continued softly. I might not be able to see you, but I can tell that you've changed. In no small part due to this doctor, I presume. Your writing speaks very highly of him. Without warning, Shinobu's heart began to race, and she bowed her head once more, hiding her face, despite the fact that Kaguya could not see the affect his words about Naruto were having on her. He chuckled knowingly. Now, of course, some preparations will need to be made before his arrival, but I look forward to meeting this man in the coming weeks. Present day, Naruto looked on silently. For the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do. Normally, when he encountered a demon, it, more likely than not, ended with him beating them into the dirt, usually with a raise-non, or two. But this situation was different. Nezuko was different. The desire for his flesh, for his blood, was still there. She was a demon, after all. Yet the will to not act on these impulses was also there. If her tears were any indication, she did not want to eat him. She was struggling not to eat him. She was wrestling with a nature that existed to consume, to devour. Her behavior was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed in a demon. It made him relax. Made him let his guard down. What to do, then? He wondered. Should he reach out to her, try to comfort her? Maybe. Still, if he got any closer, that could exacerbate the issue. But that didn't matter, did it? Naruto knew that he could easily defend himself against her, so why not try? Why not try a gentler approach? So, he took a step toward her. Nezuko's eyes remained locked on him. There was primal desire in her gaze. Also, fear. Fear of what she would do to him if he got any closer. Nezuko trembled all the more, Tanjiro growing more and more desperate. She was larger too, increasing in size until she was taller than her brother. The muzzle was still in her mouth, wet with seeping drool. Naruto took a clean cloth from a drawer in his desk as he approached. She was shaking, and he gently wiped her face, gently wiped the spit from the corners of her mouth. "Let her go, Tanjiro." His voice was calm, even. But I don't want her to hurt you." "She won't. Trust me." For some reason, Tanjiro chose to believe him. His hands tentatively left his sister's shoulders, leaving her unrestrained. She was now free to do anything she pleased. Free to attack. Free to devour. She didn't. Hands clenched, Nezuko remained in place. She was rigid as a statue. She gulped, swallowing hard. She was struggling. And afraid. Perhaps even afraid that he was angry at her. Naruto gave the girl a bright grin. Her eyes widened. He pulled her close, into a hug. It was a spontaneous act, one he hadn't even considered earlier. She was a total stranger. A demon, no less. But it felt like the right thing to do in this moment. Naruto placed a hand behind her head, gently stroking her hair, resting her face against his chest. This little girl was so strong. She had greater willpower than most demons, most people, and it left such an impression on him that he couldn't help but embrace her. Slowly, he could feel her hands wrap around his waist. Fearful. Uncertain. She was still shaking, still trembling. She whimpered. He held her tighter. He let her know that it was okay for her to have these feelings. That he wasn't angry, or upset, or disgusted. He didn't say it verbally, but his actions spoke louder than words. Her tears soaked his shirt. Her hold around him was growing tighter as well. She began to shrink. The shivering continued, but it was less pronounced. Tanjiro looked on with wide eyes. Finally, the door opened. Susumaru entered the dark room, Yuichiro following. She paused, head tilted as she beheld the scene unfolding in the office. Her gaze swept across the entire room, landing on both him and Nezuko. Naruto turned to her, still holding the girl. He beckoned Susumaru closer. And she drew near, walking with purpose. "A demon," Susumaru whispered. She could tell. In some way, they were all linked. Naruto nodded. He continued to stroke Nezuko's hair. "I think it's best if you take over for now." That was all he needed to say. Susumaru understood. Yet she still searched his body with sharp eyes, looking for any bite marks, or signs that he'd been attacked. Finding none, she quickly took his place. Nezuko didn't want to let go of him. It took some time and coaxing, but eventually, she latched onto Susumaru. The older demon held her close, a gentle smile on her lips. "It's okay," Susumaru whispered. "You did great." Tanjiro visibly deflated. Relief colored his gaze. He went to his sister and placed a hand on her back. Naruto's gaze was instantly drawn to those hands of his, rough and bruised from intense training. It almost reminded him of Lee's unbandaged arms. If anything, Naruto gleaned that Tanjiro was a hard worker, a fighter, through and through. "Tanjiro." Naruto's voice broke the sudden silence. "Let's talk." The teen hesitated. He glanced at his sister, whose eyes were now heavy with sleep. It must have taken everything she had to resist Naruto's blood, and all that remained was a depthless desire for rest. "You have nothing to worry about," he continued. Susumaru is a demon just like her. She'll watch over your sister. Tanjiro reluctantly agreed, casting one last glance at Nezuko. After what he'd witnessed, he had no reason to mistrust any of them, especially when they were well acquainted with Miss Tamayo. So, he turned and followed Naruto out of the office. Naruto led the way. All the windows and curtains of the clinic were now closed, blotting out the midday sun. Not even a speck of light was allowed inside, thanks to Yuichiro. The pair walked through a corridor, passing by areas dedicated to patient care. Before they could make it to the front door, someone peeked their head through one of the rooms. It was Sao, an older teen with jet black hair. She'd been among those attacked and severely injured by Mukago's animals. She was the last remaining victim, still recuperating after that vicious event. Naruto. Her shy voice stopped him in his tracks. He turned. Hey, Sao. You alright? Did you need something? The young woman opened the door wider, twiddling her hospital gown. Her eyes snapped to Tanjiro, then to his sword, then to his demon slayer attire. She froze, and a pained look crossed her features. And no, it's nothing important, she quickly said. I'll tell you later. She continued to stare at Tanjiro's sword, before closing her door. Naruto arched a brow, but moved onward, until they were outside on the porch. The bright rays of the sun assaulted their retinas, and the blonde pulled two seats for them. A moment of silence slipped by. Tanjiro sat stiffly, awkwardly. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. You hungry? Naruto asked casually. His stomach, having a mind of its own, growled in response. Tanjiro blushed. I don't want to impose. Nonsense. Just wait here. I'll get you something. Does ramen sound good? Tanjiro nodded. Before he could utter another word, before he could apologize for what had just transpired, Naruto was already gone, almost as if he didn't care that a demon had just salivated all over him. Tanjiro didn't know what to make of this man. He could smell the food long before it arrived. Tanjiro tapped his foot nervously. This wasn't like him. Not really. He barely feared anything nowadays. He'd faced many flesh-eating demons, after all. He'd survived Urokodaka's hellish training for 2 years straight. So why? Why was he so apprehensive? Not only that. He also felt guilty. He felt the need to get on his hands and knees and beg Naruto for forgiveness. He was a guest in this house. Naruto had opened his home to a complete stranger, only for his normally well-behaved sister to lose all sense of reason. She'd been doing so well too, he whispered. What changed? Could it really be Naruto's blood? Was it so enticing to demons that even Nezuko could crack by just being in his presence? Naruto hadn't even been bleeding. Yet he'd had such an affect on her. He hated to imagine what would happen if his blood had been involved. Tanjiro lamented. He hoped that this event hadn't changed his sister, hadn't reverted her back to the state she'd been when she was first turned into a demon. He sighed, slouching. This was his fault. Miss Tamayo had told him about Naruto's special blood. But he hadn't taken the proper precautions. He should have left Nezuko outside, he should have never brought her so close to him, not only risking Naruto's life, but also the other teen that lived here. The scent of food grew stronger. Tanjiro sat up. Naruto arrived with 2 bowls of ramen, freshly made, and steaming. He also brought 2 cups of water and gently laid them on the table. The blonde sat down with an excited grin, just dying to dig in. Tanjiro stared. Was he really not upset? Naruto began slurping his noodles with a vigor unmatched by any. He was practically inhaling the contents of his bowl. Tanjiro had never seen anything quite like it before. Naruto paused. Go on. It'll get cold. I might not be as good of a cook as my student, Yuichiro, but I do make a mean bowl of ramen. Tanjiro nodded slowly, not wanting to be rude. He ate slowly at first, and before he knew it, he was eating just as quickly as Naruto. It was that good. Naruto chuckled. Told you. When he was finished, Tanjiro drank his cup of water, then thanked him for the meal. He glanced at the floor. About what happened? No need to apologize, if that's what you're about to do. Naruto sat up, a nonchalant look on his face. But my sister, Tanjiro said, she almost attacked you. And his eyes broadened. You could have been hurt. Look, Tanjiro. What your sister did in there was one of the most impressive things I've seen. He leaned back in his chair. Her restraint in response to me was unlike any other demon I've encountered. Remember my friend, Susumaru? Tanjiro nodded, and Naruto chuckled. She's nice now, but you can't imagine what she was like when we first met. Just think of Nezuko, but less, in control. Much less in control, actually. So, trust me when I say that I'm not angry. I'm not even annoyed. The scent coming from Naruto was an honest one. Tanjiro focused, taking in an aroma that was kind, playful, and forgiving. He could smell his sister as well, then the other teen, then Susumaru, and one more demon? The scent lingered in the garden. It was familiar, but also different. I thought there was only one demon here. Tamayo sent you. Naruto said. How is she? The demon slayer looked down, unsure of what to tell him. In the end, he settled on being plain and transparent. Her clinic was attacked and destroyed last night. Naruto frowned, brows rising. Attacked by who? His voice was calm but tinted with worry. By 4 demons, Tanjiro explained. Well, 3. I was busy fighting one of them while the other 3 destroyed her clinic. Tanjiro paused. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is there another demon staying here, besides Susumaru? Naruto didn't deny it, asking, how can you tell? I have a really keen sense of smell, he answered. Huh, neat. Naruto crossed his arms. The other demon you're talking about is in the basement right now, tightly restrained. You have nothing to worry about. Okay. Tanjiro hesitated. It's just, the smell of this demon is very familiar. It's similar to the one I faced last night. Naruto froze, then suddenly let out an exasperated sigh. Don't tell me that the demon you fought had eyes on his hands. Yeah. The teen nodded slowly. Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose. Well, that just made things more complicated. Is Tamayo all right? She's fine, but upset. Her home was destroyed. I can't imagine losing that much of your life's work in one night. He gripped the hilt of his sword. Sorry. I tried to stop that demon, but he managed to escape. I hope he didn't cause you too much trouble. Naruto shrugged. Not at all. Besides my gate. Susumaru knocked some sense into him last night. Good. Tanjiro paused. But he's still alive. Naruto nodded. Let's just say that he had a change of heart. Though, how genuine that is remains to be seen. Tanjiro seemed conflicted by his revelation. So Naruto explained in detail what happened between him and Susumaru, and about his blood, and how he was willing, but still cautious, to extend a helping hand to demons that genuinely wanted to change. At the end of his explanation, Tanjiro was pacified. He didn't know what to think of it. Demons could, after years of being in that state, actually change. To any other demon slayer, such a notion might be summarily dismissed as nonsense. But as someone who had a sister that resisted her urges and refused to hurt humans, it wasn't such a far-fetched idea, considering the fact that he had just met 3 other similar demons, Tamayo and Yashiro. And now, Susumaru. The list kept growing, adding fire to his hope of turning Nezuko back into a human. It was fine, Tanjiro decided. If Miss Tamayo trusted this man, then that must speak volumes of his judgment on this matter. I don't really understand all of it, Tanjiro said. His smile was soft, gentle. Still, if a demon can truly, genuinely change their ways, I have no reason to oppose it. He rubbed his burgundy-tinted hair. I don't even know why I'm so worked up about this. It was Miss Tamayo's home that was destroyed, not mine. She's the one most affected. That just means you have a kind heart. Naruto smiled a bit as well. I'm assuming she'll be coming here tonight. Tanjiro nodded. She wanted to stop by before leaving. Leaving? She said she'll be leaving Tokyo for good, that she's too close to Kibutsuji now. Naruto frowned. He didn't seem to like the thought of her leaving. What do you mean by too close to Kibutsuji? A chill ran through Tanjiro as he remembered the encounter. With that, the pain of last night's battle suddenly pulsed through his body. He'd been doing his best to ignore it, but now, it was becoming too unbearable. You're hurt. Naruto noticed. Figures. You just fought 4 demons. Come on. Let's go inside. I'll treat you while we talk. The Demon Slayer uniform was really impressive, really durable. Despite his battle, Tanjiro's uniform was in pristine condition. He didn't even look injured at first glance, and his pain tolerance was incredible too, for he was capable of keeping a calm face, even in the most extreme amounts of discomfort. At Naruto's orders, Tanjiro removed his shirt, exposing his bare torso. He was seated on one of the medical beds in the upstairs rooms. Naruto inspected him with a keen gaze, pinpointing the nasty bruises that wrapped around his chest and back. With gentle hands, Naruto inspected his rib cage. Tanjiro flinched, and Naruto knew the problem. I'm surprised you can even breathe. You fractured 2 ribs. Naruto leaned closer, sending a pulse of chakra through Tanjiro. It acted as echolocation, allowing him to mentally visualize the internal structures of the teen's body. Luckily, there was no fragmentation, or puncturing of either lung. Tanjiro let out a pained laugh. I've been really lucky with these injuries. I have to be more careful. Naruto agreed, placing both palms on the teen's back. So how long do you think it'll take me to recover? He trailed off, feeling a sudden warmth envelope his torso. Tanjiro's shoulders relaxed. His jaw fell slightly agape. The pain slowly began to ebb away. It was a unique feeling, one he didn't dislike. The stabs of agony dulled into an ache, and then, after several minutes, into nothing at all. Shock kept him in place. Did Naruto just heal him? Did you just? Naruto grinned. I did. Do you feel better? Tanjiro quickly stood from the bed, twisting, turning, even going as far as swinging his sheathed sword. Way better. Thank you, Naruto. He settled and sat down, childlike wonder in his eyes. How did you do that? Magic, Naruto revealed, then grabbed a chair of his own. Never mind that for now. Let's continue. Right. Kibutsuji. Tanjiro visibly soured. I met him. In Asakusa. Naruto arched a brow. So, he'd been that close. However, based on what Susumaru told him about a teleporting Biwa demon Muzan could be long gone by now, especially after being discovered. Tell me what happened, he said. And Tanjiro did, recounting the events of last night. He had a child with him too, a girl, even though he eats people. Tanjiro's fists clenched. And this girl has the same name as my sister, my dear Hanako. That was the worst part. How can someone so evil, so full of darkness, act so normal? Like everything he's done is alright. I just don't understand it. As horrible as this sounds, Tanjiro, he probably doesn't see his actions as wrong, Naruto explained. People like him think what they're doing is right, that it's necessary. He has a goal, most likely. Something so all-consuming that he'll stop at nothing to achieve it, even if it requires trampling over the lives of thousands. I've known such a person. Really? Yes. Well, more than one. Looking at him curiously, Tanjiro asked, "How did you deal with them?" "By killing them. It helps that we were at war," Naruto added. "Some people can be reasoned with. I've seen it many times. But some simply can't. They won't change no matter what you do. People like Madara, like Kaguya. Muzan is one of those people. Tamayo told me that he's been alive for 1,000 years. He's had a chance to change, but hasn't, despite having the power to do so." Naruto placed a hand on Tanjiro's shoulders. "So, don't focus on what drives that man to commit atrocities. Instead, focus on one thing." Tanjiro tilted his head, hanging on to his every word. "One thing?" "Yeah, the thing you're good at, cutting off the heads of evil demons. Get strong. Strong enough that even Muzan won't be a challenge to you." Hearing those words, a fire blazed in Tanjiro's beautiful eyes, and he nodded firmly. He pulled his uniform back on, leaving his green Haori on the bed next to him. By now, it was just past 3 p.m. At any moment, his Kazhigai crow could arrive and whisk him off to another assignment. Which was unfortunate, because he was starting to like the warmth and comfort this place brought. So, before he ran out of time, Tanjiro decided to tell Naruto about why he was here in the first place. "Miss Tamayo said you might have information on the 12 Kizuki," Tanjiro said after a moment. "That's the reason I'm here." His determination did not fade. "I'm trying to turn my sister back into a human, and I need blood samples from strong demons so Miss Tamayo can do more research." Naruto frowned. If only she'd told me. I could have had syringes with me when I fought the lower moons. I could have given her a lot of blood samples. While Naruto lamented the missed opportunity, Tanjiro stared. Wait, you fought members of the 12? Yeah, about 3 weeks ago," he said casually. "They caused quite the scene, even threatened innocent people as a way to capture me. Idiots. You're not a demon slayer, though." Tanjiro marveled. "How did you win without a Nichiren sword?" Naruto grinned. "Oh, the old-fashioned way. I beat 'em bloody. Then left them in the sun. Well, not all of them. I did have a little help from a member of your organization." Shocked, Tanjiro shook his head. "That's incredible. Unfortunately, I don't have much information on them. The attack was completely random and unprovoked. And they're long dead at this point." "Oh, okay." He sounded disappointed, so Naruto leaned close. "Tell you what," Naruto began, "since you came all this way, how about a little training before you leave? I'm no demon slayer, but I might be able to add something to your skill set." Tanjiro's eyes lit up. If Naruto was capable of going toe-to-toe with powerful demons, and winning, he'd be a fool to refuse his offer. "That would be great," he exclaimed excitedly. "Thank you." Naruto smiled softly. He'd done this for Ozaki and Murata. So why not do the same for the kid? 4 hours. They trained for 4 hours. From 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. The sun had just set, and Susumaru exited the clinic. Nezuko was beside her, now awake, holding Susumaru's hand tightly as though they'd known each other for years. It hadn't taken long, but the pair already bonded. All this time, Nezuko had been asleep in Naruto's office, laying her head on Susumaru's lap as she drifted off into a deep slumber, lulled to sleep by the older demon's gentle hands against her hair. The clang of steel against steel echoed through the garden, ringing in her ears. Susumaru's gaze was drawn to two figures in the distance. Naruto and Tanjiro. Both her and Nezuko watched them. They had been at this for some time. Even while Nezuko slept, Susumaru heard them sparring. Of course, they would take a break here and there, but the training resumed and continued in earnest, even as the sun sank beneath the horizon. "Your brother's working hard," Susumaru commented. She squeezed Nezuko's hand. The younger demon, as if understanding her, let out a cute hum of approval. Her eyes were wide and bright, observing her brother with what could only be a look of love and admiration. Without warning, painful memories rose to the surface of Susumaru's mind. She'd had siblings once, years ago. She'd been the youngest of three. Her older sisters had always been wonderful to her, always protective and caring, always playing games with her, despite the fact that they grew up in a very strange situation. Since regaining her human memories, she rarely liked to dwell on it. Because now that she recalled everything, she realized her childhood was not a kind one. The image of a cold smile flashed before her. Kibutsuji's face appeared. And two eyes etched with the words Upper Moon 2 was all that she dared remember. They were both there, on the day she was turned. Susumaru shuddered, a chill crawling up her spine. She was pulled from her dark thoughts by Nezuko. The younger demon was now squeezing her hand, head tilted as she looked at her. Curious. Concerned. She gave a strained smile. "I'm okay, Nezuko. Just remembering something." Shoving those memories aside, her gaze was drawn back to Naruto and Tanjiro. They were still sparring, clashing with enough force to launch sparks through the air. Naruto clearly had more skill, but she was still impressed by the Demon Slayer's ability to adapt to a much stronger opponent. While Tanjiro was doing an incredible job, Naruto's moves were flawless. Every attack sent his way was immediately blocked, redirected, and then countered. He was fast, yet fluid, able to change directions in a blink, feet gliding against the grass as though he could walk on air. He was beautiful. Breathtaking. Golden hair glistened beneath the moonlit sky. And suddenly, all the negative feelings about her childhood began to ebb away. Because that was the past, she was free. Nezuko suddenly tugged at her haori, and Susumaru turned to her new friend with a bright smile. The younger demon was jittery, almost bouncing up and down. Nezuko glanced at her, then at Naruto and Tanjiro. Even though Nezuko spoke no words, Susumaru could understand some of her desires. Whether it was due to the connection between them as demons, or something else, she didn't know, but it sure was helpful when trying to communicate with her. Nezuko continued shuffling in place, even pointing to her brother. It was adorable. "Oh," declared Susumaru. "I get it. You want us to play, just like they are, don't you?" Well, they weren't playing per se, but from Nezuko's perspective, it certainly seemed like they were involved in some type of game, considering the fact that there was no visible malice between Naruto and Tanjiro and they genuinely seemed to be having fun. Nezuko nodded quickly with a humph of approval. Susumaru giggled. "How about we show them what we can do?" She summoned a single tamari, bounced it a few times. She altered its size, make it slightly bigger than normal. Nezuko gazed at the ball with wide, excited eyes. Susumaru went back several meters, making sure she wasn't in the direction of the clinic, in case things got out of hand. She used her knee, kicking the ball up and down, performing several tricks for Nezuko. The girl jumped up and down with anticipation. "All right," Susumaru announced. "Here it comes." She kicked it gently. The tamari soared at a reasonable pace and made its way toward Nezuko. In a flash, she returned the ball with a lightning-fast kick, one that made Susumaru grin excitedly. So she kicked it back, quicker this time, testing the waters. And Nezuko did the same. "She's pretty strong. How fun." They continued their little game. Nothing too complicated, but still very enjoyable. The pace of the ball increased until it was nothing but a blur, soaring between both demons at speeds impossible to achieve by most people, even by most demons. Susumaru made sure to hold back a bit, for Nezuko's sake, yet each time the pace increased, the younger demon was capable of competing. It was almost as though, given enough time, Nezuko was getting stronger, adapting to her opponent. After a while, Naruto and Tanjiro stopped to watch them. She'd never known kicking a ball back and forth could be so riveting, but apparently it was, because the two behind them continued to spectate. Eventually, Nezuko slipped up and missed the ball by a hair, and it soared past her at high speeds. Before the Tamari could hit anything, or cause any damage, Susumaru released her blood demon art, and the ball faded into nothing. Grinning ear to ear, Susumaru yelled, "Good job, Nezuko." Nezuko beamed in response, beautiful eyes delighted. Tanjiro laughed softly as he walked closer. And seeing him, his sister ran and embraced him tightly, wrapping her arms around his waist, resting her head under his chin. He did the same and held onto her, hands reaching up to touzle her hair affectionately. "How's she been?" Naruto asked. He moved to stand beside Susumaru, sheathing his tanto. Susumaru crossed her arms, enamored by the sight of both siblings. "She was asleep most of the time, but she's been fine since waking up." Naruto nodded slowly. "Nezuko's really different. She didn't immediately try to bite my face off, unlike someone," he teased. Susumaru's face warmed, and she looked away. Shut up. I'm only kidding, Su." He playfully wrapped an arm around her neck, pulling her close to him. Her blush intensified, even when he finally let go. "I think this is nice, the fact that more demons are breaking away from Musen's hold." "Yeah, it is," Susumaru whispered. She was happy, hopeful for the future of those like her. "What about your friend? How's he doing?" Naruto asked after a moment. He hadn't gotten a chance to see him today. She smiled easily. "Yahuba's awake. He still can't move, thanks to your seal, and he's fine with that. We talked about a lot of things earlier, about last night, about the past, and about the future. I know you don't trust him yet, he understands why, but I really think he's going to work hard to change, harder than me, even. He wants to help find a way to turn all demons back, or at least prevent people, children, from being turned in the first place. He also wants to apologize to Tamayo for his involvement in the attack." "So, he told you what happened with Tamayo, then?" Naruto stated. She nodded. He stroked his chin in thought. "As much as I'd like to believe him, I still can't let him roam free. I'm going to seal away his eyes, the ones on his palms, so he can't use his powers." "You can do that?" Susumaru marveled. "I think so," Naruto replied. "It's more complicated than immobilization, but doable." "You think he'll protest?" "No," she spoke firmly. "Not if he knows what's good for him." "Good." Naruto thought for a moment, then said, "Shinobu's crow should be arriving any day now. We'll be at Demon Slayer headquarters by next week. Are you still okay with coming?" "Of course," Susumaru answered without hesitation. "Wherever you go, I go." Naruto chuckled. "Then it's settled." "Hell yeah, it is." Susumaru punched her palm. "Because I'm gonna beat Shinobu in shogi the next time I see her." Wipe the smug smirk off her face. Just then, a meow echoed behind them. Expecting to see Kimiko, Susumaru was pleasantly surprised when a different cat, possessing calico fur, materialized as though from nothing. A paper talisman hung from his neck, tail lashing happily through the air. "Chachimaru!" Susumaru squealed. She scooped up the gorgeous tomcat, nuzzling him. He purred in response, always eager to receive attention. "Hey there, buddy." Naruto gently petted the cat as Susumaru finally put him down. "Tamayo sent you, huh?" There was a note attached to his back. Naruto stooped down to retrieve it, reading its contents carefully. It was a message from Tamayo, detailing what had happened last night, as well as the fact that she was on her way to see him, and that he shouldn't worry that they were safe. Naruto would have preferred to send a clone to protect her as she made her way to his clinic, but since she felt there would be no issue getting here, he chose to trust her judgment. Susumaru picked up Chachimaru once more, and the cat clambered up her shoulder, rubbing against her affectionately. She giggled, scratching him behind the ear. "So, Tamayo's coming." Naruto nodded. He turned to Tanjiro. "When's your next assignment?" The teen shrugged. "I don't know. Whenever my crow tells me to leave, that's when I'll go." "In that case, how about you and your sister spend the night until it's time to leave?" Tanjiro smiled happily. "If that's okay with you, I'd love to." "Nezuko." The younger demon grunted, as if understanding. Naruto made sure to keep a bit of distance from her. Nezuko didn't seem too bothered by him anymore, which was good. But he still noticed her tremoring and shivering when she was in close proximity to him. "Head on inside. You can take a bath and stay in any room upstairs." Yuichiro was an amazing cook. Naruto could never grow bored of his elaborate meals. To say the least, he was hooked. And Tanjiro was as well, judging by the way he devoured his dinner. They all sat at a dining area normally used by patients. All five of them were present, just talking and laughing and teasing each other. After a while, Susumaru and Nezuko, not needing to eat, left the table and began playing with Kimiko at the other side of the room. Chachimaru had vanished just as he'd appeared. Sent back to Tamayo by Naruto. Naruto, Yuichiro, and Tanjiro remained at the table. Naruto had sketchbook open, wherein he crafted various symbols, trying to find the right one to seal Yahuba's eyes shut. He racked his brain for ideas, using Kakashi's and Jiraiya's, and his mother's formulas for inspiration. "You really trained on a mountain for 2 years?" Yuichiro inquired. "Yeah," Tanjiro replied. He suddenly looked nostalgic. "It was difficult, but rewarding. There were so many days I wanted to quit. Actually, I think I wanted to quit every day." He laughed a bit. "I still made it, though. I survived." "I'm impressed," Yuichiro admitted, adding, "that final selection thing seems a bit brutal, though." "It was," Tanjiro said sadly. "Only 3 of us survived." The mood turned somber, so Naruto looked up from his writing. "Oh. Tanjiro. I've always been curious about those swords demon slayers carry. I know they come in many colors, and that they use the sun's energy, but how exactly does that work?" Eager to talk about something else, Tanjiro placed his katana on the table. He unsheathed it slightly, revealing a glinting black blade. "It's made from a special metal that absorbs and stores sunlight. As far as I know, the only way to permanently kill a demon is to sever their heads with a Nichiren sword. Though, I honestly don't know how they change colors." Naruto hummed in thought. He'd never gotten a chance to ask Shinobu about Nichiren blades, so Tanjiro's answer fascinated him. It also made him hesitate when Tanjiro passed the sword to Yuichiro. If what Tanjiro said was true, then Naruto wasn't too keen on touching those blades anymore. He'd only held Ozaki and Murata's swords briefly, but now that he considered it, maybe that hadn't been a good idea. "Hey, Kurama. Is it possible that we can negatively affect this type of sword if I hold it for too long?" There was a pause. "It's possible. There is a notable concentration of solar radiation, a form of natural energy in the metal. If you hold that sword for an extended period of time, both of us could, theoretically, start absorbing its energy, rendering the blades useless for a little while." That's what I thought. It was a theory, unproven, but not without a logical basis. He'd become so adept at entering sage mode that his body unconsciously absorbed tiny amounts of natural energy from the atmosphere. Not as much as Yugo. And certainly not enough for him to create Senjutsu Chakra, but perhaps just enough for him to distort a Nichiren sword's properties. Not like he wanted to use them to fight, anyway. So for Tanjiro's sake, he refrained from holding the black blade just to test a theory. It was getting late. Tanjiro yawned, then sheathed his sword. I think I'll head to bed. Thank you so much for dinner. He stood, bowing his head slightly. Good night, Tanjiro, Naruto said warmly, as did Yuichiro. The young demon slayer turned to leave, and Nezuko, a distance away, noticed, and followed after her brother. She waved at Susumaru as they both exited the dining area. After several more minutes, Yuichiro went to pack supplies for Tanjiro, before bidding them good night. Don't stay up too late, he told Naruto, to which the blonde waved him off, chuckling. With only two of them left, Susumaru grabbed a chair and sat next to Naruto. A comfortable silence slipped by as she watched him work, eyes wandering the page filled with complex symbols and various ceiling arrays. How did you learn to do all this stuff? Susumaru voiced. What stuff? Naruto asked, looking up from the table. You know everything. All the techniques you can do. Understanding her question, Naruto said, clones. Since I gain the memories of my clones, I can have them study things, anything, and learn many, many times faster than most people. You're so smart, Susumaru said with wide eyes. Naruto laughed softly, shaking his head. No, I'm not smart. I just work really hard. Equally impressed with his answer, she continued to watch him work late into the night. Soon after, there was a knock on their door. Naruto already knew Tamayo was here the moment she entered the garden. He closed his book and stood up, and Susumaru followed. Naruto could see the sadness in her eyes. Tamayo looked worn. Exhausted. Not a physical kind of exhaustion, but a mental one. She'd done her best over the years. She'd worked so hard to atone for her wrongdoings, creating a place to help those in need. She'd worked tirelessly to find a cure for all demons, long before he'd arrived in Japan. That clinic was one of her greatest achievements. She'd managed to stay hidden for years, aiding the sick, helping the poor. All this, without a desire to be praised or recognized. She'd taken him in, a total stranger, nearly 3 years ago when he was at his lowest point. She nursed him back to health, treating his injuries with such care that he still remembered every moment of their first meeting. Naruto didn't say much. Only embraced her. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't be. Tamayo pulled away with a gentle expression. I could have helped, Naruto protested. You should have sent a message. Her gaze grew sterner, and she spoke, almost like a mother scolding her son. It's not your job to protect me, Naruto. She reached up and stroked his whiskered cheek with her thumb. Her eyes softened. I appreciate your concern, I really do. However, this isn't the first time I've had such a close call. I moved on then, and I'll move on now. Naruto sighed. Fine. I get it. You win. Tamayo smiled and pinched his cheek affectionately. Then she turned to Susumaru, who had been silent, unsure of what to say. Hello, dear, Tamayo greeted. It's good to see you. I like your new clothes. Susumaru nodded quickly. She shuffled nervously. Thank you. Don't be so apprehensive, Susumaru. Tamayo pulled her into a hug. I already know that Yahaba is here. Her eyes widened. You do? Yes. She let go of the younger demon, only holding her gently by the arms. Naruto sent me a message through Chachimaru earlier. He told me everything that happened last night. So, you have no reason to be fearful. He destroyed your clinic, said Susumaru quietly. Not necessarily, the older demon replied. He didn't lay a finger on my home. The other 3 with him did. He was too busy fighting Tanjiro. Susumaru's shoulders slumped. Still, he was involved. And in the end, you helped him to begin the same journey you're on, Tamayo added. If he turns out half as wonderful as you have, then I have no reason to be angry. She looked wistful, saddened. After all, we've all done terrible things as demons. What happened last night is negligible. No human lost their life. That's good enough for me. Her wisdom, her maturity, stunned Susumaru, and the respect she had for Tamayo only grew stronger. Yahaba told me that he'd like to talk to you one day. She paused. That is, whenever you're ready. I'm ready now. Why delay it? The woman laughed. But really, I'll talk to him later. For now, I have something to discuss with Naruto. Nodding, the blonde glanced outside the open front door. Who are those two? He was referring to a man and woman. One was a demon, and Yashiro was outside, keeping a close eye on the man. He was bound in ropes, his eyes closed, as though in some sort of induced sleep. Tamayo explained the situation, about how the man had been recently turned, and how his wife chose to remain with him. He's under my blood demon art, but I made sure to have Yashiro keep him far away from you, just in case he sensed your blood. Oh, I see. Then, fast as lightning, Naruto went outside, pulled out a simple seal from his holster, and attached it to the newly turned man. Black symbols wrapped around his body, restraining him further. Naruto returned to the front door. That was an extra precaution, he explained. You can come in now, Yashiro. There are rooms downstairs for him to stay. Susumaru will take you there. She nodded and led them away, leaving him and Tamayo alone. Well, not entirely alone, because Chachimaru materialized at the demon's feet, purring. Tamayo picked him up, and they went to Naruto's office. Walking through the door, she paused to observe the room, eyeing every corner with a keen gaze. I don't think I've been here before, Tamayo noted. Holding Chachimaru under one arm, she placed a hand on the beautiful wooden desk housing paperwork. I like it. Well, I sort of copied your office, he admitted with a laugh. Her smile was soft, her gaze filled with much care. I'm so proud of you, she suddenly said, after looking around. Naruto blushed, rubbing at his hair. Even now, he wasn't used to being praised. What for? She sat down on a sofa in the office. You've come a long way since the first day we met, she explained. Oh, yeah, he said wistfully. During his first weeks in Japan, he'd been at his lowest. He'd been sad, depressed, injured, weighed down by all his failures during the war. All the destruction. All the death. Niji's death. Hinata's death. Sakura's death. And to top it off, he'd been whisked away during his battle with Sasuke, the residual energy of their final clash opening a tear in space. Some child of prophecy he'd turned out to be. To say the least, he'd nearly given up. But Tamayo and Yashiro's presence, knowing that someone cared, had been enough for him to crawl out from that pit of despair. Tamayo especially. She was like a mother to him at this point. And he loved her dearly. Which was why he did not agree with the next words that came from her mouth. I'll be leaving Tokyo for good, Tamayo finally said. She looked sad. I just wanted to tell you before I left. Naruto sat down beside her. Where will you go? Tamayo sighed. Somewhere far away from here. I don't know yet. So, then, I won't be visiting you as often anymore. A pained expression crossed her features. I suppose not. Naruto frowned. You can't, he said firmly. You can't leave. The seriousness in his eyes made her resolve waver. Naruto. I have to. Why? Because it's not safe anymore, Tamayo argued. Not for me. Not for Yashiro. Not for those around me. I have so much left to do. I'm close to finding a cure, I just know it. I can't have it all come crumbling down. Not again. I can protect you, Naruto replied. You have nothing to fear. And yes, I know you told me earlier that it's not my job, but I don't care. Her resolve was shaking, and she couldn't look into his eyes, lest she change her mind about leaving. This isn't your fight. I don't want to distract you from returning home, or put you in danger. Please. You won't put me in any danger, he assured. So stay. Here. In my clinic. Naruto. She was losing steam, her resistance faltering. Tamayo, this is the safest place in Japan, he said confidently. I have 6 clones in the basement. They each have the majority of my chakra flowing through them. You have nothing to worry about. Shoulders slumping, she frowned. Why your clones? What about you? He chuckled. Well, I'm actually the one who's going to be leaving soon. Leaving? She sat up. Where? I'm taking Yuichiro to see his brother, remember? I'll be visiting the Demon Slayer headquarters. Remembrance flickered in her lavender eyes. That's right. It slipped my mind. Naruto gently clasped her hands in his own. So, while I'm gone, I need someone to take over for me, he explained. Who else could do it but you? I. She tried to protest. He'd presented an enticing offer. One she couldn't resist. Protection. Safety. And a place to work. How could she turn down such a thing? Especially when he looked at her with those beautiful blue eyes of his, almost pleading. Just like her youngest son used to do so many years ago. In the end, Naruto won her over. She stopped resisting. Fine. You win this time, Naruto. The grin that spread across his face was priceless, and that look, that happiness in his eyes, was enough to ease her mind of fears concerning the future. Tanjiro left at the break of dawn. His crow squawked loud enough to wake up half the clinic. Tanjiro apologized profusely, embarrassed by the bird's eccentric behavior. But Naruto didn't mind, remembering Ozaki's louder and even more obnoxious crow. At the entrance of the clinic, Tanjiro got his things together. Yuichiro was still asleep, but he'd made sure to pack food for Tanjiro the night before, in the event that he was called away for an assignment in the morning which, as anticipated, he was. It was almost a tradition now, providing a sort of care package for any demon slayer that visited his home. Naruto handed Tanjiro the bag of supplies, filled with food, medications, bandages, and even a bit of money. Tanjiro was moved by such kindness. I've only been here for 1 day, but you're giving me all this. The teen marveled, bowing his head. Thank you. No problem, Tanjiro. It's a gift from all of us. Don't even think of trying to give something back in return. Tanjiro hesitated, but nodded, accepting the supplies without protesting. The sun would be rising soon. Tanjiro had already said goodbye to Tamayo and Yushiro. Now, it was just 4 of them that remained. Susumaru hugged Nezuko tightly, nuzzling the younger demon with her cheek. Oh, Nezuko. I had so much fun playing with you. Please be safe. The younger demon returned the hug enthusiastically. I don't know when I'll see you again, Tanjiro said softly. Just 1 day was enough for him to start feeling sentimental. I appreciate you giving me a place to stay. Don't worry, Naruto said happily. I might see you again sooner than you think. After all, he was going to visit Demon Slayer headquarters, and who knows, maybe Tanjiro would be there as well. Tanjiro arched a curious brow but didn't dwell on Naruto's statement. A moment later, Nezuko moved toward the blonde. She paused, a slight shiver running through her. Naruto watched Nezuko curiously, and Tanjiro seemed nervous, ready to pull his sister back. But she remained still, looked up with wide eyes. Naruto's gaze was gentle. He ruffled her beautiful hair. She blinked, then reached up to hold his hand, leaning into his touch. A stray thought crossed his mind in that moment. What if he offered Nezuko his blood? What would become of her? Would it help, or hurt her? Right now, she was in a better state of mind, not ravaged by bloodlust. She was well within reason to accept his blood. It was an interesting idea. Yet Naruto didn't linger on that prospect for long. The siblings were leaving. It would be odd of him to bring it up. Especially after what had happened earlier in the day between him and the younger Komatsu. It was nice meeting you, Nezuko. He turned to Tanjiro. Take good care of her, okay? Tanjiro nodded firmly. I will. Before they left, Naruto stretched out his fist. The demon slayer stared and wondered what it meant. Naruto chuckled. Where I come from, it's kind of like a greeting, and a way of saying goodbye, just like a handshake. Oh, I see. So just do this. They bumped fists, and Naruto smiled. Yeah, exactly. The siblings departed after that. It was a short-lived visit, but an important one, nonetheless. In caring arms, a swing of his fist was enough to shake the earth. Blasts of wind tore the forest apart, collapsing trees, sending splintering shrapnel soaring about like bullets fired from a shotgun. Even though they outnumbered him, his very power, his sheer might, nullified their numerical advantage. The demon mowed them down with his hands alone. He punched with enough force to cleave a human being in two. Each blow sent a missile of air soaring at supersonic speeds, destroying the bodies of any living thing it struck. Theirs was an unlucky encounter. Yet he felt no remorse for them. After all, the law of nature was immutable, unchangeable. The strong thrived, and the weak suffered. Akaza didn't flinch as her Nichiren blade came swinging toward his throat. In fact, he made no move to block, or dodge, the azure katana, even as it struck home, making contact with his nape, cold steel against his neck. Nothing. Not even a drop of blood was spilled. The female demon slayer panicked, hands quivering. She pulled back, then sliced again and again and again, trying oh so desperately to cleave his head from his body. Again, nothing. It was akin to using a blade made of paper to cut down the trunk of a tree. Simply put, it wasn't possible. A distance away, 3 other demon slayers, all males, had fled, abandoning their teammate as they raced to escape with their lives. Pitiful. He ignored the female demon slayer, setting his sights on the 3 cowards running with tails between their legs. How he despised weakness. How he loathed cowardice. It made his skin crawl, left a bitter taste in his mouth. Weakness of any kind deserved to be extinguished, that was his philosophy. Akaza blurred out of focus, moving so fast it seemed he'd faded out of existence. He appeared in front of the fleeing trio like a bolt of lightning, shattering the ground beneath his feet. They froze, all of them, horror contorting their features as they stood face to face with Upper Moon 3. Truly, how unlucky of them. Air type. Akaza reared a single fist. In a blink, he punched 3 times. And all 3 slayers were turned into corpses, destroyed by air pressure alone, dead before they knew what killed them. How boring, he hissed. Akaza cracked his neck and stepped over his victims. He didn't even bother to consume them. Their cowardice had ruined his appetite. The female slayer, on the other hand, was different. She'd shown some promise, despite being so weak. He paused and watched her from afar, curious to see what actions she would take. She was shaking, hands tremoring violently. Yet she held her blade up, ready to keep fighting. Despite the death of her comrades, she gritted her teeth and charged, screaming at the top of her lungs one final cry of defiance. Akaza grinned madly. That's more like it. Weak as she was, This demon slayer had promise. She was upon him in seconds, swinging her blade once more. Akaza yawned. He knocked the blade from her hands and grabbed her by the face, slamming her to the ground with unrelenting force. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs. She struggled against his hold, kicking, scratching, biting, fighting to the bitter end, a far cry from her fearful, so-called comrades. Her eyes were full of fear, yet her body displayed a strength of will few possessed. He wasn't going to kill her, though, despite the way things appeared. Above, the clouds were clearing. The moon shined down like the sun, and he saw her face clearly. Akaza froze. Koyuki. He shook his head, blinked, wondering whose name that was. The demon slayer looked familiar. She resembled someone. Someone he used to know. But who? Akaza frowned deeply. He couldn't remember. Those memories were gone, lost for decades. He quickly let her go, feeling sick. The terror in her eyes made him freeze. Then suddenly the world faded to black. A distinct Biwa resounded in his ears. And he was standing in a dimension of infinite buildings. Akaza's fists clenched. That name. Koyuki. It rattled about in his mind, bringing with it nothing but sadness, frustration, rage, and love. Lord Akaza. It's been a while, hasn't it? Someone appeared beside him. They put their arm around his neck, pulled him close. How I've missed you, Lord Akaza. Did you miss me? A chill of disgust ran through Akaza as he heard that false, cheerful tone. He glanced to his left and witnessed a fraudulent smile, a smile so fake it made his skin crawl. Already frustrated beyond belief by memories of the past, Akaza did not hesitate. He whirled around and kicked Doma. Hard. He sent Upper Moon 2 flying. Doma's body tore through countless buildings, lifting dust, debris, and shards of glass. The devastation was unfathomable, fueled by an anger he could not explain. Breathing heavily, Akaza noticed that everyone was watching him. Everyone. The lower moons. The upper moons. Even Kokushibo. Thankfully, Lord Muzan had not yet arrived. Moments later, the dust settled. Akaza's fists remained clenched, his anger unquenched, even after that dramatic display of violence. He turned, ready to continue. Ready to pummel Doma into a puddle of blood. A rush of wind froze him in place. Before he could move, Akaza felt a burning sensation. And then, both of his arms were severed in a spray of crimson. He grimaced. Kokushibo was beside him, having moved faster than he could react. Upper Moon 1 sheathed his blade before Akaza's blood even stained the floor. A hand fell on Akaza's shoulder. Enough. Calm down. Kokushibo's powerful voice washed over him. Level, not angry. But firm. His very presence demanded respect. This is neither the time, nor place for your squabbles. If you want to fight Doma, make it official. Challenge him to a blood battle. Do not desecrate the hierarchy of the 12 Kizuki with petty nonsense. Is that understood? Akaza instantly calmed down, heeding those wise words. As much as he hated to admit it, both Kokushibo and Doma were leagues more powerful than he was. Doma emerged from the rubble unscathed. His body was already healed, shrugging off any damage he might have sustained. Upper Moon 2 laughed happily. You're so amusing, Lord Akaza. I almost didn't see that one coming. He leapt back on the same building as before, smiling brightly. You've gotten stronger, haven't you? That kick hurt, but only a little. Akaza ignored Doma. Why are we here? He asked. After all, every member of the upper ranks were accounted for. The same couldn't be said for the lower ranks, however. Kokushibo's 6 eyes took in all those that were present. I don't know. He glanced above him. It must be important. Akaza followed Kokushibo's gaze. Above them, seemingly defying the laws of gravity, was the king of demons himself. Muzan. He'd finally arrived. End.